Welcome to One Soccer Today for Monday, January 20th, 2025. Guess who's back? Back again. Gareth Wheeler with you.
Wheeler!
Back from an extended vacation. I'm feeling vibrant. I'm feeling alive. We're ready to go for a big year ahead in Canadian football. Below me's Jordan Wilson. Oliver Platt's here as well. The boys are back together, and I'm thrilled about it. How are you, Jordan?
Wonderful, buddy. Honestly, I feel complete now that you're back. You know, you were the guy in preseason that came a week late. You missed all the beep tests, but now you're back for the footy, baby. The real stuff. The 11
intentionally. Well, you were doing the beep tests and the push-ups and sit-ups. I was on the beach in Mexico crushing margaritas, man.
Nice.
I hope you had a spicy marg in my honor. I hope so.
I heard that Oliver Platt spent his holidays going back to beautiful Milton Keynes. Just about like a beach in Mexico, pretty close.
Very similar. Does a lot for the soul as well. So I had my own little therapy there.
A reset.
Yes, it was a nice little reset, but we're thrilled to be back. And we're back each and every day. Your only show entirely focused on Canadian soccer on a daily basis in this country. The thing is, I got a lot to get off my chest, I feel, boys. Like, there's been a lot of news. We're not going to go through it all today. We're going to take this incrementally, okay? Because there's so much to get into. Let's start today with Toronto FC. And they announced over the weekend, I don't think it was a secret over the last week or so, that Theo Corbeanu has signed with the club. He joins on loan from Granada. It seems like a fiscally responsible deal, not too much of an outlay for a club dealing with obviously salary cap and budget issues and another offseason of great change after playing seven teams in 4 different countries over the course of the last 3 or 4 seasons. Could Toronto FC be the spot where Corbeanu's career finally comes to fruition, finally blossoms into really the promising career that so many of us expected when he burst onto the scene? Jordan Wilson, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it needs to be, right? Obviously. But I think when I look at a player like this, we've been talking about him in some form for a while. And just to see that he's only 22, I'm like, oh, you're still so young. But what I will say, and this happens to a lot of players that are that age when you start hitting 21, 22, 23, people talk about your potential and what you could be. And because you're so young, they're like, oh, you have time. But once you start hitting 24 and 25, and that's right around the corner, that's the time where you actually need to be showing your product and be making sure that you're not just a young player on the block, that you're a player that's established. Even looking at him playing over 100 games professionally, they're so fragmented, right? There wasn't really a set rhythm and a consistency that you would need. So this is an opportunity at TFC, a team that's not doing so well, but that's your hometown club, that you have to just hit the ground running. You can't take half a season to get going. He has the quality. He's a guy that I think TFC will use in the right way in terms of his attacking qualities and the way that he's a bit direct. But he can't wait 3-4 months. He has to start from the beginning.
Ollie, what do you think?
I think he needs to find a home. So maybe literally coming home can provide that, right? Like this is a player who's 22 years old, and since he made his first team debut with Wolves, MLS will be his 8th league in his 5th different country. It's just too many. It's too much chopping and changing, I think, for a young player who obviously needs a bit of consistency at this point in his career. So I don't think Theo Corbeanu needs special treatment, or there's something that needs to change with him necessarily, aside from just that continuity. I just think he needs a stable environment. He needs minutes. He needs a team that believes in him and gives him some confidence and has a clear idea of how they're going to utilize him. And that's probably the question with TFC is, can they provide all of those things? Because they haven't ticked some of those boxes in recent years. But if they can start to do that and be a bit more of a settled place to play, then I think he can be successful in MLS. He has that quality.
Hey, Wheels, quickly before we get in, sorry, but I just want to make the comment about loans. It's like sometimes when you're a player that's a loanee, you're getting into the club. You're still you're the guy on the outside looking in, right? Every club is going to prioritize their own players. I feel like Corbeanu kind of fell into that trap a little bit as a player, that he got to a club, but then wasn't really, really settled. He was still, outside looking in. So hopefully TFC could be that home where he's settled and he can get started.
Yeah, absolutely. We all like the profile of the player. Strong, fast, technically pretty good as well. He's the right age. This is the type of signing, the type of move that Toronto FC needs to do more of. This move to me kind of screams a little bit more CF Montreal than it does Toronto FC, which I actually think is a good thing for this club. No more middle-aged players or older, maybe a little bit long in the tooth players that you think may be able to do a job. I think that the ceiling's high for this player, and there's a potential that there may be, or there could potentially be a future there as well. I just wonder, and this is the $1 million question for whether it works out for Corbeanu at Toronto FC or not. Is the squad in a position where you can get the most out of the player? Because Jordan, you know what it's like as well. You go to a club, it's in transition. They might be struggling. They might not be very good. It's very difficult for young, talented players who really have experienced a whole lot of change to maybe settle in and finally see the best out of that player. What do you make of the state of Toronto FC and whether this move makes the most sense for the player on the field?
Yeah, it's a great point because we all spoke about how it's comfortable for him to come back home. But then again, we never really addressed, well, you just mentioned it right there, the state of the team that you're coming back to. And that is a big thing, right? Like if you're looking for a move to kickstart your career, to get back into good graces or to show your potential, do you go to one of the worst teams? And this is not me out of my opinion. This is just going off of the last 2 years of the fact, like a team that struggled to go forward, didn't really finish games well. And now you're looking at a situation where you're going to start the season. I mean, you got to look at it the half glass full, I guess, mentality is that he's going to play. This is not a situation where he's on the bench and playing time scarce. I mean, they're going to use him and he's going to be a vital part of trying to rebuild this team. But again, I think managing expectations from Fraser and staff will be very important to the start.
Okay, but Ollie, I'm going to pivot, Ollie. Just started to cut you off. Yeah. Where's he going to play? And how is Toronto FC going to play? Because this team was clearly built through the recruitment under John Herdman and his staff to play in a 3-4-3, a very different formation. Just knowing Robin Fraser, I think he plays more of a 4-3-3 formation. At least he typically has in the past. This requires maybe a change in role. I'm not sure if that comes into the equation for you at all.
It's an interesting fit with Bernardeschi just because they're quite similar profile of players, I'd say. You know, both fairly quick, powerful wingers, obviously left-footed players who prefer to play on the right. Can you double them up with Bernardeschi at wing-back and Corbeanu further forward in a bit more of an inside role? I don't know. This is the interesting thing about TFC for me, and I think there's an optimistic reading and there's a pessimistic reading is that aside from Corbeanu, they haven't done an awful lot so far this offseason. It's difficult to see exactly how this roster is taking shape. Now, you could say they're kind of clearing the decks before they bring anyone in, and maybe they need to do that at this point in terms of their cap situation and so on. You could also say that there's not been an awful lot that's been impactful or that makes you think that this team is going to move forwards based on where they were last year. I don't know where you guys kind of stand on glass half full or empty in that regard.
No, we're with you, brother. I am. I'm with you for sure.
I look at that traveling roster, the traveling squad that's going to Spain. This is a big concern for me. I actually think that Toronto FC are worse off than they were at this point last season. You know, you can say a lot of things about Toronto FC under John Herdman. The one thing that they were locked in to playing a certain way, a certain formation, and then went about filling gaps in order to do the best that they could do to play that way. I'm not sure which way Robin Fraser would play, but if it is a 4-3-3 or something like it, I have some real concerns about this squad. First and foremost, and I have no doubt that Toronto FC will add a number 9 between now and the start of the season. Like, this has to be the number one priority, but you need more than one number 9 for me to add to this team. Like, who's leading the line here? I think they're okay in the wing positions, despite the fact that I firmly believe that Lorenzo Insigne will not start the season with Toronto FC. Just that relationship for me is completely untenable, no matter what both sides say right now. Still, I think they're okay in wide areas. Central midfield is a big problem for me. Like, they're not very athletic. They're not very quick. They're not very balanced, and they're light on personnel. That's a real problematic area, especially when, Gold Cup international competition, take Flores, take Osorio out of those positions. Yikes. Center midfield, they need more there. Center back, a huge issue as well for me in this team. Again, Gomis, I think there's a lot of reason to believe that he can be part of the solution here. He has some value. Other than that, just the depth, the speed, I think it's a real problem area. That's right down the spine of this group. New manager coming in, new staff. I worry about where this team is going into the season. And I think that things could be rather bleak if certain moves aren't made, and I'm not sure if they have the flexibility to do that before.
But that has to be the game plan, right? We also like getting rid of Insigne is it feels inevitable, and I think after that, then once things are cleared out, it's like you have to start rebuilding.
But then you're kicking the can where you're going to be adding a DP in the summer window, not the start of the season. Where will the team be at? Like, look, next year, Rosted off the books, Petretta off the books. Like you start creating a little bit of space at that time. But I think this year, I just don't know, Oliver, like really quickly, you said there's an optimistic perspective. What is that perspective?
Well, I mean, it would involve them having to be willing to spend quite a lot of money to achieve that optimistic perspective. Because if you're paying off Insigne, which I don't see any other way out of it to get out of that contract, then you have a DP spot open. You could potentially buy Larea down and you have another one, but then you have to sign 2 DPs, right? And what are the finances going to be like in terms of the type of player you could attract to fill those spots? So I don't know. A lot still to be answered ahead of the start of the season.
All right. Let's go down the Gardner to the QEW and land in the great city of Hamilton, Ontario, as there's some controversy potentially swirling around Forge once again this offseason, as Beni Badibanga made some comments about the 2025 roster, claiming that his contract was terminated. Obviously, there's always two sides to every story. Oliver Platt, what are you hearing in relation to the roster news when it came to Forge, then the comment made by Beni Badibanga?
Yeah, like you said, I think it's always important in these situations to remember there's two sides to each story, because it tends to be the case that the player's side comes out first in terms of social media. maybe more in terms of social media posts and so on. It's an unfortunate situation. Like to be clear, first of all, as far as Forge are concerned, Badibanga is still under contract. They activated his option for this season. So in terms of a termination, that hasn't happened. From their point of view, that there's a couple of points of contention here that have been kind of floated out there. The first is about this option year and, would it be activated or not? It's always been in his contracts. Like he signed a 1.5-year deal with an option year, a club option year beyond that to extend it into 2025. That was never news. That was always there from day one and has been activated. I've been told that Forge offered to basically rework his deal, including to improve his terms, and Badibanga didn't want to do that, or, presumably because at this point he seems to be looking elsewhere. So that's that situation. And then in terms of like the potential transfer and talk of there being a fee that was agreed and then Forge backing out of that and, offers being made, some of that I've just been told is plainly untrue. There has been an offer for him, but it was very, very recent in the past few days, not last year. And this is where things get a little bit murky and a little bit cloudy in the world of agents, because at times I think, things get brought to clubs or players bring things to clubs saying, my agent's saying this offer has been made. And then the club, tries to kind of reciprocate and respond and explore this supposed interest. And there's nothing there, nothing materializes, and it's all kind of smoke and mirrors. And it seems like that has maybe been the case a little bit with Beni Badibanga and some of the things that his agent has been bringing, or whoever it's been, that haven't necessarily had the basis that I think is being reported right now. So it's a situation that I think probably leads to a divorce, obviously, between player and club, just because, a player not showing up for training camp, certainly wanting to leave the club at this point. It's hard to come back from that, but it will be about Forge now trying to find a deal that's, fair and appropriate to move the player on, I would guess at this point.
I mean, this happens in the world of football, but when a player's under contract, if he's going to leave, certain terms, certain standards need to be met. And Badibanga is a player that has value. That was an excellent player for Forge over the last year and change. If there is this, which seemingly looks like a divorce, as you put it, Oliver Platt, between player and club, I want to go to you, Jordan. How much will Forge miss Beni Badibanga if this relationship can't be patched up?
Well, what he brought was that flair, right? And he had a moment or moments throughout the campaign where he's just going to step up. I think a big one, obviously, being TFC when they play at Tim Hortons Field, like to chip a keeper from 60 yards. Like he'll do stuff like that change the game. But there are also games where we watch and like you check out. That's what happens with a risk reward player. I think Forge, what they've done is they've added a Brian Wright that's in form and a 9 that they've needed. And I said before last week, Wheels, you weren't really here to give me stick, but I said that's the biggest signing in a 9 position that they've ever done. And I'm standing by that because now there's pressure on that guy. A mobile bully coming in as well, who knows the Forge way. I think that's something to really have that position. If they can get one more guy, maybe you're not getting a Beni Badibanga with the flair, but you still have enough quality in wide positions and in attacking positions to really go and compete with the best. So it's one of those things. If Benny was to return, but his heart's not in it, you would sacrifice him, and he would be a guy on the bench for guys who want to go and play and actually commit. So it's one of those things when you're a risk-reward player, sometimes it's easier to cut you out and put players that want to be in that position.
There are very few players in world football who are irreplaceable. Let's be honest, and especially in the Canadian Premier League. Like, every player you can play, and Forge has shown this. They've lost some very good players over the year, but they've recruited well. They've adapted. They've evolved their style. I just, it's too bad because we really like Benny, and I thought he was a really good fit with that team. You just don't like to see things play out the way that they have here in recent days, Ollie.
No, and like what I'll miss about this player if he does move on is, like you said, I think Forge have lost good players in the past and they find ways to replace them. And there's already a lot of great attacking talent on that roster under contracts. But Badibanga, I think, was a different type of player than maybe we've seen before in that he was just so unpredictable, and such like the definition of a flair player who could come up with, some absolutely ridiculous moments and then some moments maybe where he had his coaches tearing their hair out a little bit or games that weren't so great, but like moments like this, right? And obviously everyone thinks of the goal against Toronto FC from inside his own half. Like that's something that I think that's a player you love watching if you love football, and he will be missed in that regard.
Yeah, stylish both on and off the field. I hope things work out well for club as well as the player as this situation continues to play out in the coming days. The one area where Forge seemingly need to address every offseason is replacing a center back that leaves. Garvin Matusala left. Now there are reports that Dan Nimick is on the verge of signing with Forge FC. The center back had a down year of Halifax after really impressing in his debut season, his first with Halifax Wanderers in the Canadian Premier League. How would the addition of a Dan Nimick reshape or help bolster potentially the Forge back line, Jordan Wilson?
They needed him. And the biggest strength of Nimick when watching him play is the fact that he's a ball-playing center back, right? He can pick a pass, a player that's 50 yards away, he can get it to them, he can play between the lines. But I look at Matusala leaving specifically, and I look at Dan Nimick, and I think Matusala is a better defender. I think if Nimick is going to go there, I know everyone says you play the Forge way, you have to play up, but he's going to be playing with better players around him. But I think in the defensive aspect and actually taking care of the area around him, he has to be top tier. And he's shown moments in 2023 of doing that. I know last year was a bit of a dip, and that happens sometimes. The sophomore slump is a real thing. But now going to play for Forge, you're going to play CONCACAF Champions Cup. You have to make sure that you're ahead of the game, that you're reading situations. You make your job for your right back very easy. And he can't really have the dips in his game like he did last season. So we hope for the best. But I think Matusala is going to be a really big loss for Forge going into this 2025 season.
Different type of player, Oliver, but could Nimick be a fit? Like, by no means did he have a bad season last year. He just set the standard incredibly high in year number one.
That's true. I tend to I don't want to overthink this one. I think he's an outstanding defender in the Canadian Premier League. He's signing for a top club. Chances are I think it works out pretty well. So maybe, like Jordan's right, Matusala will be missed. There's maybe some stylistic differences there. But it's a bet I'd be willing to make if I was Bobby Smirniotis, and it sounds like he will. Just quickly, one other one. Forge are obviously trying to address right back with Malcolm Duncan having left the club. We heard and floated Kunle Dadaluk's name last week on the show. It sounds like that one's cooled off. But another familiar name, Reza Rama, now coming up
Oh,
as potentially a
Rambo.
solution at right back for Forge. So watch out for that one.
Rambo.
Interesting. As Champions Cup action straight ahead, February dates. Let's just hope the weather warms up ahead of that home fixture at Tim Hortons Field. Maybe not so much for the opponent, but those that will be attending that night.
No, we want to freeze
week here in southwestern
Home
Ontario.
advantage.
Yes, but to a certain standard, there's cold and then there's minus 25.
You
Those
don't
are
want
two
the
very
weather where you
different
smile
things.
and your teeth hurt.
I don't know,
that's
guys.
where we're
I think,
at right now.
I think they want it as cold as possible.
Oh.
Or your nose starts running and it
And
just
it
like
freezes?
It's like tusks
into the
on
beard?
your face. That is
we don't
too
want
cold.
that, Wheeler.
Nose freezies. That's what they call them. So last week on the show, I wasn't here, but apparently it was reported that several Canadian Premier League teams were eyeing Marco Bustos returning to this country to pursue professional endeavor. Jordan, do an update on this story, where things stand with Marco Bustos.
I have an update. He signed. Back to Pacific, baby. 2-year deal. I'm pretty sure that number 10's been waiting for him. He's going to pick that up. And the question is, Wheels, Ollie, is he going to pick up where he left off? I mean, Pacific from when Marco Bustos left to the Pacific now is honestly unrecognizable. A different team. When he was there, it was Manny Aparicio, Diaz. They played such an attacking style. Hurd was there getting assists. The Santos, they've always had a squad, right? This is a team that you won a CPL title with and beat Forge at Tim Hortons Field. That's a Bustos that we know and remember. Who is going to come and accompany him, and how is this team going to be moving forward? But regardless, for a fan of Vancouver Island, you're excited to get the number 10 back, Marco Bustos.
Seems like a game-changing move by Pacific, bringing Marco Bustos back. We know the quality he's had with that European experience. Seems like a home run to me, Oliver.
I think so. I think, again, top player. You don't think too much about it. I'm interested, and Jordan maybe will know more about this than I would. Not conflating Denmark and Sweden with being the same country, but obviously close proximity. Is he a different kind of player? Like, how has he evolved as a result of that experience of going to Europe, and how that impacts his game? I'll be interested to see. But yeah, he's a top player, and I think should make a big impact on that team.
I think he'll be more clever for sure, right? That guy just preached the Scandinavian way. Obviously, it's not the biggest countries, Sweden, Denmark, but the tactics. But I think the question for him is going to have a leadership role. When he was there, he had the Dixons, the Herds, TMG, other players to kind of just lead as well. You're looking at the specific side. This is a crucial, vulnerable time for them. They're looking for Marco Bustos, who's had that experience abroad, who's done so well in the CPL. He's going to have to be a leader from day one, stepping back into that locker room.
Come back a bit more worldly.
Yeah. Whatever that means. I mean, I'm fine with the old Marco Bustos, because we know what a difference maker he can be in the Canadian Premier League. Look, there's changes at Pacific, but weren't changes required? You mentioned that he was coming into a different place. The players on the right, Dyer, Moore, Reed, Yates, Mayer, Giguère, good players, but the team really struggled last year, and I'm more looking towards those attacking players. The goals just weren't in the team. Ronan Krat, another player, really impressed when he was in the Canadian Premier League before going abroad as well. Aiden Daniels, an attack-minded midfielder. This seems to be the area of the field which they require more work, and I'm sure Pacific are not done yet. With Gazdov and Quintana, and if Endom can come back, I still think there's a nucleus of players out in Pacific that can make this squad very competitive. What do you think, Oliver?
I think so, but I think the question kind of flips now of like, maybe they've lost a little bit in the spine of the team, and does that now need to be addressed? Because you can be excited about Bustos and Krat and Daniels, and I agree. Josh Hurd maybe can have a bit of a bounce back year as well, and that's a good group in terms of attacking players. But you've lost Giguère, you've lost Moses Dyer as your number 9, Dominguez and Toussaint, 2 others who went on that boards. Central midfield players who have been pretty foundational for them. Yates as well. That's coming after the year where Didic and Aparicio obviously walked away. Like, I look at centre-back, central midfield, and striker now and think that area of the team probably needs a little bit of attention if they're going to be really competitive this year.
When they were champions in 2021, they had presence all throughout the team. guys when things got rough or when you needed a big moment, that like Naughtons, Dixon, that Aparicio that stood up and said, yeah, this is us. This is what we stand for. I think the past 2 seasons, specifically last year, we just saw too much dip, too many guys hiding. TMG was a huge name. I know I just mentioned, but you need more players like that are like, hey, even on a tough day, we're going to grind it out and get it done.
Yeah, at the same point, the volatility in the attacking 3 or 4 positions last year, it was so detrimental to this group. I expect Bustos to be an every game player that you're going to lean on heavily. Same thing with Ronan Krat. Zanata finished the season really strong. If those 3, you can put them on the team sheet, 80% of the games to start, I think that's a good place to start. From the biggest problem was in attacking areas, guys. Like that was it. And potentially some ready-made solutions to come in and help this team. My eyes are on Gazdov as well. If they keep Gazdov some way, I think that would be huge for this club going into the 2025 season. I'll reserve my firm take on whether they'll be better or worse next year, but these moves excite me, at least on paper.
Yeah, you gotta wait.
Excite me.
You gotta wait till you see more.
Too early for the way too early.
Way too early.
Some foundational pieces. I'm starting to like what I see, guys. I might have to shift over from Vancouver to Vancouver.
In January.
We'll see. Do it early. Get it done. Time now for our Tonybet top picks. Top picks are presented by Tonybet. I love this Champions League model, by the way, the 36-team competition. Only 3 teams have been eliminated with 2 match days to go. Only 2 teams are guaranteed to go forward in the knockout round. Liverpool will finish somewhere between 1 and 16. The top 8 get a bye. Barcelona also have guaranteed themselves in the top 24, but that's all that's been settled. It's going to be chaos. So let's go to Anfield as Liverpool, who are top of the Champions League table, take on Jonathan David's Lille. This is a big opportunity for me. Never mind the line. We'll get into our picks in a moment in time. But this is all about Jonathan David. The great Canadian striker is clearly, we all know this, is out of contract, and new clubs are pursuing him. It just seems like games like this, a big English opponent at a legendary stadium like Anfield, there will be a lot of eyeballs on Jonathan David to see what he can do on this stage when the spotlight is really firmly on him. Lille have had a very good Champions League campaign and can put themselves in good position as well. But from a Canadian and transfer market perspective, all eyes are going to be on Jonathan David to see what he can do. What do you make of what's on the line here for Jonathan David on Tuesday in Liverpool, Oliver Platt?
I got a couple of things on this. Firstly, from a club perspective, if he is staying at Lille for the rest of the season, which I think most people expect, like it's a massive moment for that club. They've got a couple of games here with a real chance to secure a place in that top 8, if not at least to go through to the next round and secure more of these big games they've been playing. And then the second thing I'll bring up, which, Wheels, I don't know if you heard this take from me last week, but if you didn't, you may not like it, is I would love to see Jonathan David at Liverpool. I think it's just such a good fit for him in terms of the style of play and the style of player he is. And if you have the attention to go to Anfield and maybe capture some of that attention, I think it's obviously a wonderful opportunity for him. So yeah, it's a massive game for multiple reasons, but I just think this could be such a good home for David in the longer term.
Is the pressure on? I mean, they call him the Iceman. It seems like he has ice running through his veins. I'm not sure if you would call it pressure ahead of this tie. Jordan, what do you make of this?
There's an opportunity for him. I don't think he's looking at it as pressure. I will say with the English Premier League, anytime you go to England, there is a bit of arrogance. You've seen top strikers throughout history, and you go and you sign for an English club and just like Falcao, Morata, certain players, you're like, they could score goals in Spain, France, whatever it is. You go to England, it's just different gravy. I know there are people saying Jonathan David is a top striker, but can he do it against England opposition week in and week out? And I think he knows that, and he's relishing this opportunity to be like, I'm the Iceman worldwide. Doesn't matter where I play, give me some service. I'm going to go and show out. So I think he's scoring as well. I think it's a big opportunity for him to show what he can do.
Well, let's get into that market in a second. It's just the way the English media works, the English language media, there's just a lot of focus on Premier League clubs. And Liverpool are one of the the two biggest clubs in that country, and they matter. And a night like this will matter. Liverpool are being said to be the best team in club football today. So this is a big litmus test for a player. Can he hang? Can he ride? And if he does perform and if he does score, Ollie, you know the way that this works. The English press will pick up on it. He'll be linked to every big club in English football. And this is what David's agent wants right now if you're trying to drum up some kind of market to get the best deal on the table, right? Like, that's what's on the line here, a potential contract, drumming up interest. I'm sorry, like scoring against Real Madrid and doing these big moments, huge moments, but the way that the media entity works when you perform against a club like Liverpool, Ollie, it just takes it to another level and could play in the hands of his agent as well.
It would. And you think back to, like, I remember the game he played against Chelsea a few years ago where maybe it just came a little bit too soon for him and probably wasn't the type of tie that he had hoped for. And now you get that second chance where he's in the best form he's been in. He's scoring against top clubs. We've seen it against the Madrid clubs, Juventus. It seems like everything's lining up for it to be a really big moment for him.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I'm really happy for him. And I hope that he performs on this massive stage. Again, Liverpool, with all due respect to Chelsea, Liverpool, bigger club. This one matters. Best, again, I believe that they're the best club in world football today. So we'll see how he fares. So Jordan Wilson, when we get to our Tonybet top picks, Jonathan David to score plays at plus 245. To assist in the game is plus 1,000. You're going to be making a play, Jonathan David to score at plus 245. That's a big number here.
100%. I said I bet this year. Last year, 2024, I didn't bet, but now ran into a little bit of money. I bet now.
Real money.
Scoring. You want to know why? Because for Canada, he shows up. For Lille, he shows up. Those moments, those big moments, he always plays well. You never see him drop past like an 8.5, and he shows up in the box. If he gets that one opportunity, he's putting it away.
Liverpool has been locked, have put teams on lockdown in this competition in the earlier stages, but in recent weeks, Ollie, they've been a little bit leaky defensively. Does this present opportunity? I mean, I love Konaté as a player. I think that he's playing really well. Van Dijk, it's going to be a real challenge for David in this one.
It will be. They've been a bit more wobbly in recent weeks than obviously they were in the preceding months. Like, my heart says yes. My head still says that Liverpool take control of this game and win it. But let's see. I don't want to bet against Jonathan David.
Okay. Minus 313 if you want to back Liverpool. It's a big number. The draw at plus 500. Liverpool at plus 800. Lille have come away with any results. If I was going to make a play, potentially Lille on the handicap here. It's a tough one to make in this game, but Lille right in the mix in terms of the Champions League. If they can come away with anything here, a draw in this game would feel like a win for them as they go to Anfield on Tuesday night. All right, that's it. Like I said, it's great to be back. We'll be back tomorrow. The topics, they're coming thick and fast, and we can't wait for you to be with us every step along the way. On behalf of Aller Platt and Jordan Wilson, I am Gareth Wheeler. Wheels down with this episode of One Soccer Today.